But it's not a TV show, it's real life. Imagine a little girl, she's literally just 3 years old, and her entire world is absolutely shattered. Her mother is accused of treason, adultery, conspiracy, the whole 9 yards. And honestly, whether the charges are true or not doesn't even matter, because her father, the king, just wants her mother gone. So with one swing of a sword inside the Tower of London, her mother is dead. Welcome to this explainer. Today we're unpacking the incredibly intense true story of Queen Elizabeth I. We're talking about a life that kicks off in pure trauma and fear, but somehow, against all odds, transforms this frightened, helpless kid into one of history's absolute most legendary rulers.
So the immediate fallout of that execution back in 1536, just devastating. Anne Boleyn's death meant this little princess was instantly stripped of her royal heir status. Just like that, she's declared illegitimate, she's no longer safe. And you have to remember, in the blood-soaked, super treacherous world of Tudor England, losing your royal status wasn't just, social embarrassment. It brought a constant, daily, very real threat of death. At literally any moment, she could just disappear. A political loose end tied up in the dark. But here's the thing, this constant terror actually instilled this deep-seated hypervigilance in the young girl, shaping this incredibly cautious reality that, as you'll see, becomes her absolute greatest political asset.
Section 1. The Silent Tudor Survivor.
All right, let's dive into this first chapter. Now, most kids raised in a constant state of fear, they're broken by it. Totally understandable. But for Elizabeth, this immense, unthinkable trauma actually built her foundation. Throughout her childhood, she was forced to navigate the Tudor court, which, let's be real, was basically a battlefield disguised as a lavish palace. It was a world of intense palace intrigues. We're talking eavesdropping spies, constantly shifting alliances, deadly whisper campaigns. And this rapid, violent loss of safety forced her to grow up instantly. By her teenage years, people were already whispering about her dangerously sharp intelligence. Her childhood traumas directly molded this cautious, calculating personality that literally kept her alive in a place where just one wrong word meant a trip to the executioner's block. The contrast in how she spent those formative years compared to everyone else is just a masterclass in growing stronger through hardship. While the quote-unquote normal nobles were out spending their days hunting, dancing, partying, Elizabeth was 100% focused on survival. She's sitting there studying Latin, Greek, French, Italian. She's reading up on philosophy, politics, and actual warfare. But honestly, her greatest education wasn't even from books. She learned how to read people. She learned how to spot lies, what raw ambition looked like, and exactly how betrayal hid perfectly behind these polite, courtly smiles. So while everyone else was just playing games, she was forging her armor, connecting her keen observation skills directly to those intense palace intrigues she had to survive every single day.
Moving right along to Section 2, From Prisoner to Queen. Well, all that intense education would soon be put to the ultimate test. After the death of her father, Henry VIII, England essentially descends into a total nightmare of religious conflict. Eventually, her half-sister, Mary, who you probably know as Bloody Mary, takes the throne. And Mary looks at the highly popular Elizabeth and sees a massive threat. Because let's face it, popularity in a dangerous kingdom can very easily become a death sentence. So, in 1554, a rebellion erupts, and Elizabeth's name gets tied to it. The soldiers arrive. She's arrested and transported to literally the most feared place in all of England, the Tower of London. I mean, just imagine the sheer terror here. A young woman being sent to the exact same slaughterhouse where her own mother had been executed years prior. As she passed through those gates, she knew for a fact she might never leave alive.
Every hallway carried ghosts.
Every stone carried memories of death. Take a second and just imagine the crushing psychological weight of those walls. Knowing that every single footstep outside your door could belong to the executioner. Yet, this, right here, is where Elizabeth's strategic patience was first truly tested. Because what did she do? She didn't beg. She didn't falsely confess out of sheer panic. She just waited. She had learned the ultimate lesson of survival during her traumatic childhood. Never ever let your enemies see your fear. It was just a masterclass in surviving extreme psychological trauma through total, absolute calmness.
And then, the impossible happens. At the age of 25, this frightened, imprisoned outcast unexpectedly becomes the Queen of England, following Mary's death in 1558. But hey, don't get it twisted. This is no fairy tale ending. All these powerful men scoffed at her, totally expecting this young woman to fail immediately so they could just step in and control her. And to be fair, the hand she was dealt was absolutely terrifying. She inherited a complete and total disaster. The economy was collapsing, the nation was violently torn apart by religious hatred, and foreign enemies were literally circling the borders, just waiting to carve up this shattered kingdom.
So, what did she actually do? Well, instead of rushing into some rash decision or panicking under the immense pressure, she applied 3 simple steps that were forged right out of her trauma. Number 1, listen. Number 2, observe. And number 3, calculate. Think about why this strategic patience was so revolutionary at the time. In a world full of kings who ruled by impulsive violence and massive egos, her power came from stillness. She used calmness as a literal weapon to entirely disarm all these powerful, manipulative men who were trying to control her. She just patiently gathered information until she firmly held the reins of the entire kingdom.
Section 3. The Virgin Queen's Strategy.
Right off the bat, as a female ruler in the 16th century, she instantly became the target of intense, high-stakes political manipulation. The marriage offers just poured in. I mean, Europe went into an absolute frenzy. Spain, France, Austria, every king and prince wanted to marry her. And why? Because these highly aggressive foreign kings thought that marrying Elizabeth meant gaining direct influence over the English kingdom. They genuinely believed they could just absorb her power and reduce her to a mere figurehead. But Elizabeth understood something her peers totally missed. Marriage could be a cage. A foreign king would cost England its independence, while marrying an English noble would definitely spark a domestic civil war. So what does she do? She plays an incredibly brilliant diplomatic game. By staying unmarried, she kept the possibility of marriage dangling out there like a carrot. She actually prevented massive empires like Spain or France from attacking simply because they still hoped to eventually win her hand. Year after year, proposal after proposal, she politely refused them all, applying her trademark strategic patience to global diplomacy. She earned the legendary title, the Virgin Queen, flipping what everyone thought was a perceived weakness into her absolute greatest strategic advantage, totally transforming herself into the untouchable symbol of England itself.
But of course, a public image can only protect you so much, right? While she held court in the light, this dark, invisible war of intense palace intrigues and paranoia was absolutely brewing in the shadows. Think about it. How do you fight an enemy you literally can't see? Constant Catholic plots were emerging. Assassins were hiding in plain sight. There were constant whispers of poisoned garments and secret domestic rebellions being orchestrated from the dark. Even the Pope himself declared that Catholics no longer owed her obedience, which essentially painted a massive glowing target directly on her back. To survive all this, she needed an invisible shield,
So against the Catholic plots and assassins, she deployed Francis Walsingham's sophisticated spy network, which was frankly one of the best in Europe. This was a world of pure cloak and dagger flair, okay? Invisible ink, double agents, intercepted codes, the whole shebang. Against foreign attempts to overthrow her, traitors were systematically exposed in total silence. She watched, she waited, and she calculated from the very center of this incredible intelligence web, neutralizing threats way before they ever even reached the throne room.
But eventually, the shadows produced a threat she absolutely could not ignore: Mary, Queen of Scots. She was a rival queen who many believed actually deserved the throne, and she was suddenly linked by hard evidence to an assassination conspiracy. Elizabeth faced an unbearable, totally impossible decision: execute a fellow anointed queen, which would inevitably trigger a massive international war, or spare her and risk losing her own kingdom and her very life. Elizabeth agonized over this. Employing her signature strategic patience, she delayed the execution as long as humanly possible, right up until her spy network provided completely undeniable proof. Finally, in 1587, she made the agonizing choice. Mary, Queen of Scots, was executed. And with that single stroke of the pen, war was no longer just a threat. It was an absolute certainty.
Section 4. Defeating the Spanish Armada.
War had finally arrived. The invisible battles of spies and codes were suddenly replaced by the sheer thunder of cannons right at England's shores. In 1588, Philip II of Spain unleashed a monstrous fleet. The sheer, terrifying scale of these Spanish galleons, casting massive shadows over the water, it was a terrifying mismatch. The Spanish Armada brought hundreds of massive ships and immense cannons. They were literally considered invincible. Their goal was crystal clear: invade England, overthrow Elizabeth, and restore Catholic rule. Facing them was the English fleet, significantly smaller but much faster. And man, panic just ripped through England. Pretty much everyone believed they had absolutely no chance against this enormous empire.
But Elizabeth, she absolutely refused to surrender to the panic. Instead of hiding away in some fortified palace, she rode right out before her terrified soldiers at Tilbury. She was wearing a silver breastplate, sitting atop a massive white horse, and she delivered words that would literally echo through history. She declared, "I know I have the body of a weak and feeble woman, but I have the heart and stomach of a king." The reason this speech worked so perfectly is that it showed her soldiers she was willing to die right there in the mud beside them. It exploded with leadership and completely ignited the courage of her totally outgunned defenders. And the battle itself? Absolute chaotic brilliance. Step 1. The English commanders used their faster ships to unleash burning fire ships directly into the super tight Spanish formations. Just imagine that terrifying scene, the night sky turning bright orange as these blazing vessels drift into the enemy lines, completely breaking their formation. Step 2. Violent, freezing sea storms struck right on cue, making the sea itself seem like an English ally. Step 3. Panicked, blinded, and listening to the screams in the dark, the Spanish ships crashed violently into the jagged rocks. The invincible Armada suffered a catastrophic fiery collapse. Just like that, the greatest naval power in Europe was totally defeated.
Section 5. England's Golden Age. So, the threat of invasion was permanently crushed, and crushing that invasion allowed their sheer survival to finally bloom into profound prosperity. The wealth seized and the new trade routes that opened up triggered an explosive transformation. We're talking global trade expanding massively across the oceans.
explorers boldly sailing off to unknown worlds, literature and art totally flourishing, birthing the eternal works of writers like William Shakespeare. Under the rule of the very woman they thought would fail, a small, fragile, and deeply fractured island nation laid the absolute foundation for its unstoppable rise into a global empire.
She ruled for 44 years. I mean, really let that sink in for a second. 44 years of conspiracies, assassins, and wars. When she finally died in 1603, the kingdom was unified and strong. Let's just look at this inspiring arc one last time. The 3-year-old illegitimate outcast whose mother was literally beheaded in the tower had transformed into an untouchable monarch who died peacefully in her bed. She ruled longer and with way more success than anyone ever thought possible. She took the absolute worst hands dealt by fate and played them with immaculate strategic patience, making that calmness the very key to her legendary success.
So the absolutely crucial point we should take away from this explainer isn't just about Tudor history. It's about the literal mechanics of resilience. Elizabeth transformed the deep trauma of her childhood into an unshakable, calculating power. She observed, she waited, and she never, ever let her enemies see her fear. Which leaves us with a pretty powerful provocation as we finish up today. How will you use your own past hardships to conquer your future? Definitely something to think about.